Welcome to Taormina, about an hour or so northeast by bus from Catania in Sicily. I visited here in April 2018. I was only here for one day, but it was sunny, warm, inviting, and charming, and I think of it some days in winter, especially after a huge snowstorm. Taormina is famous mostly for its beach, which is nearly 700 feet below the level of the city, but there is a lot more to see in the city itself. Come and join me for a walk. I took this photo partly so I'd remember how to get back to the bus station. Normally a bus station wouldn't rate a mention, much less a photo in my blog, but I was grateful that the company got me so close to the action without the necessity of my having to climb 700 feet up from sea level along a treacherous switchback road, mostly without a sidewalk, so I decided to give them a shout out. The bus had already gotten me from sea level to Taormina, up about 700 feet or so from the beach, a rather famous religious sanctuary, and the remains of the Taormina Castle are still higher up. The view from close to the bus station gives you some idea of just how steep this cliff is. More climbing was possible, and the view would have been fabulous, but I had hiked partway up Mount Etna the previous day, so I took a pass. The building here is a sanctuary of the Madonna of the Rock. The legend says that a young shepherd got caught up here in a ferocious thunderstorm. The kid hid in the cave with his sheep to wait it out. Naturally, the kid was terrified. I would be too, on the highest point in the area and a good destination for a bolt of lightning. Eventually, he saw a beautiful lady dressed in blue who told him that the storm would end soon. Fortunately for the legend, the storm did end soon. His parents were worried about him, so they ran up to go take a look in the rocks, and they saw him with the sheep who had gathered around him. He told them what had happened and what he had seen in the cave. A lot of people wanted to see the place, and they noticed that on the rock, right where the shepherd saw the lady dressed in blue, there was a figure of the Madonna, which they called the Madonna of the Rock. The local bishop thought this was probably hooey, but he went to see and eventually had a church built here in memory of the story. To the extent that the shepherd claimed that his lady was robed in blue, the statue here seems to match up with legend. Saracen Castle is even higher up that hill than the sanctuary. The real story, like the castle, has been disguised by the mists of time, although it probably was the Acropolis when this was a Greek city. The Romans and later Byzantines must have strengthened the site. In 902 AD, the town fell to the Muslims after a siege of 2 years. They held out remarkably well. The Muslims rebuilt the castle into its present form, adapted to the shape of the rock, and added crenellated walls. The views from here are fabulous. This castle might not look like much today, although the outer walls are still there. This Google Earth image shows its commanding location high above the city, as well as the switchback step pathway you have to climb to get to it. It was a formidable defensive location. This is a theater, not an amphitheater like the Colosseum in Rome. It is the second largest Roman theater, not just in Sicily, but in all of Italy and North Africa. The original construction probably dates to the 3rd century BC. It was built by Greek settlers and included a temple. That temple disappeared when the theater was repaired and enlarged by the Romans in the 2nd century AD. Everything you see here comes from those rebuildings and modifications except the basic structure. It is quite impressive, and the views are just spectacular. The theater is still in regular use during the theater season, which sadly I missed. I saw these succulent plants growing along the edges of the Greek theater. Taormina gets quite hot in the summer, and while it never seems to get really cold, the way this former Hoosier thinks of cold, it does cool off somewhat in December and January. Cool is in the eye and skin of the person who is experiencing it. The weather here supports hot weather plants like these succulents. The area behind the seating on the left rises above a very steep hill. The area immediately above those seats was actually part of the outer wall of the facility. Even with much of that wall vanished, the theater appears to be as sound as the day it was opened. You can see here how the theater was set into the hill. This was a view walking up to the main entryway. This theater is still in use during the season, during which the stage would be covered with board. The stage is the area immediately above the heads of the visitors shown in the orchestra area in this photograph. This isn't the biggest theater in Sicily. The one in Syracuse is actually larger, but it has retained almost all of its surrounding wall. They were often built into hillsides to minimize the need for supporting architecture, and a great part of the stage and back wall. Behind that is the fabulous view of the sea. As you can see, the theater still has a great deal of its original back wall, although of course not all of it. Here are some of the remaining decorative elements in the theater. Most of this is long gone. Those aren't teeth in that cornice. The badly weathered part of this was egg and dart pattern. The pattern is still in use in architectural elements to this day. These are remnants of a mosaic floor in the Greek theater. I remember being told that this floor might have been part of the temple or shrine that was located here originally, but which disappeared when the Romans rebuilt the theater. The views from the top of the Greek theater literally took my breath away. It was definitely worth the climb to the top row of steps. I hate heights. Just for this $1,000,000 view of Mount Etna. Enjoy the vistas. We'll wrap up today with this glorious view of the Ionian Sea. This view shows you why Taormina has been a pleasure resort for most of the past 2 millennia. Thank you for joining me to learn a bit about the city's history and to see the ancient theater. Come back next time and we'll visit the rest of Taormina here on The Armchair Traveler.